Welcome to the Rent to Rent Success podcast, the only podcast entirely dedicated to helping you achieve rent to rent success. We talk about the ethical way to get you started in property without buying it. This is our place to inspire each other to believe bigger, to be bolder, and to be game changers for good. Property investors and sisters Stephanie and Nicky Taylor are your guides on this exciting ride. Let's start up the engines and get ready to fly. Hello. Stephanie here. Welcome aboard episode 53 of the Rent to Rent Success podcast. Oh, it's kind of a different day today. In this series of more personal episodes, well, in the last few, I've been talking about our businesses. And today I'm going to be talking about me personally, which feels a mixture of liberating and terrifying. So let me know if you like this kind of episodes and you'd like more of this, or you prefer me to keep it under wraps in future, but see what you think. Before I dive in today, if you're listening when this episode goes live, if it's before midnight on the 21st of January, 2021, then you might be in with a chance. If you'd love to get started with us in Rent to Rent this year, if you'd love to have certainty about every step you take, if you'd love to have the ongoing support as you implement the Rent to Rent success system, we would love to invite you to join us in the Rent to Rent Kickstarter program. And now is a great time. It's exceptional value. So don't leave it too late. If you want to join us now, don't wait until the door is closed. Go to renttorentsuccess.com/last chance. That's renttorents.com/last chance. Let's jump into today, to 2020, the year the world surprised us. For many of us, 2020 was a masterclass in uncertainty on a level that most of us have never experienced before. We were asked to lock down. We were asked to live differently. We didn't know when it would end. We don't know when it would end. Many of us are working from home. Some of us with young children home too, or teenagers even. I live alone personally, but I'll come on to that. We've become adept at a lot of things last year. We've become adept at waist up dressing. We've become adept at saying you're on mute. We've become adept at overeating licorice, going braless, going makeupless. Oh, okay, that's just me. In the last few episodes, I've talked about the challenges and successes in our business in 2020. And in this episode, I'm getting personal. I'm going to be talking about fat, mind games, minimalism, and happiness. So, fat. First, let me talk about fat and what I learned this year. And before I go into it for myself, I want to explain that I don't think that there is a weight that you should be. You can choose to be happy at whatever weight is best for you. For me, though, what I'd like to do is I'd like to be healthy, I'd like to be fit, and I'd like to look amazing. And for that, I would like to stay in a certain weight. And after a lifetime of struggling with my weight, I met Brooke Castillo in 2019. And she taught me something I found almost impossible to believe, that I could have urges and not eat. Wait a minute. Is that a thing? Why did I never receive that memo? Perhaps I was too busy overeating raw cashew nuts or licorice. When your favorite deliciousness speaks to you from the cupboards, as it does, this is a real thing. You don't have to answer. This was big news for me, and I lost weight and I felt good. And I started 2020 weighing what I did when I left school and knowing that I'd found the secret. And reflecting on it is the same mind skills that helped me succeed in business as well. They're the same skills that have helped me lose weight. But then lockdown happened. And to make it work, you need to use your mind. And when lockdown happened, my brain was busy freaking out and creating 90-day plans and communications plans, supporting our team, doing extra leading, having freakouts in between times. And so things started to go south with my eating. Things started to go off track. I started indulging my love of licorice again. I started indulging in the raw cashews on the regular. And yes, raw cashew nuts are good for you, but I somehow feel that a 200-gram minimum is overdoing it. And I might have continued on that trajectory of letting things get a bit wayward in the lockdown. But two things happened which got me off the slippery slope. Now, anyone with siblings is going to be able to relate here. The first thing that happened was my sister Nicky started talking to Brooke. And she started doing really well. She started looking really good. She lost weight. So now my mind is focused. And I think I got to get back on track here. Otherwise, I'm going to be the fat one, which I don't want to be the fat one. So the second thing is that a friend of mine was missing the gym, overindulging in comfort food, and he didn't know what to do. And he's locked down and all the rest of it. And I said, well, I told him about Brooke. And I said, well, why don't you give this a try? And I said, I'll do it with you. And that was such a blessing because this second time around, I was on fire. This time, I really got it. It felt so much easier because my brain knows exactly what to do. The biggest change this time is I know I can rely on me. Oh my God, that's such a game changer. I know that I got my back. And for decades, if I made a plan of what to eat, I wouldn't know for sure that I was going to stick to it. Now I know. And that feeling is freedom. It feels incredibly liberating. I can't believe I'm me because I've learned that not only can I not overeat at home, which is easy when I've only got kale in my cupboards, but I can not overeat when I'm out anywhere, when I'm surrounded by all flavors of deliciousness, when I'm in the supermarket and I can buy anything I want. I don't want it anymore. And it's because of my brain now. I've trained it and I just wish that I'd known this earlier, known it sooner, implemented it because it's so easy. It's a bit like Pavlov's dogs. They hear the clip clop of the clogs as people come to feed them, and they learn to salivate at the clop of the clogs. And later, the clop of the clogs was replaced by a bell. So let me explain how it goes in case you're not familiar with Pavlov's dogs. If you're not familiar with these dogs, I mean, like, where have you been? But anyway, this is how it goes. After the bell rings, the dogs are fed. After the bell rings, the dogs are fed. After the bell rings, the dogs are fed. Eventually, what happens is the dogs associate the bell and the food and they begin to accept it. So this is what happens next. When the bell rings, the dogs salivate. The dogs are fed. When the bell rings, the dogs salivate, the dogs are fed. When the bell rings, the dogs salivate, the dogs are fed. I think you're with me. But what's interesting though, if you keep ringing the bell and stop bringing the food, you set up a new feedback loop. So the bell rings, the dog salivates, the dogs are not fed. The bell rings, the dogs salivate, the dogs are not fed. The bell rings, the dogs salivate, the dogs are not fed. And after a while, the dog stops salivating when the bell rings. So simple. If you're an overeater like I was, and if sometimes you feel that it's out of control, and you feel like your bell is always ringing, that was me, and you feel like your bell's always ringing, oh, look at that lovely thing over there. Oh, look at that thing I could eat. Oh, things that are not even on display that you can't even see. You're thinking about going in the cupboard and looking for them. You're constantly trying to ring your bell. You're looking for opportunities. And food feels like a really important part of your life. That's how it was for me. And you get so much pleasure from it. And this feedback loop is on autopilot. And what Brooke helped me do was to break that circuit, because she told me that I could hear a bell ringing and not eat. And in fact, I could hear multiple bells ringing all at the same time and choose not to eat. And those urges used to feel so strong and so compelling that I'd never considered this totally obvious solution. And when I hear the bell ringing and I don't eat, I stop wanting to eat as much and I stop hearing the bells everywhere. I actually don't get as many urges to overeat because I'm no longer rewarding those urges. I'm now on a feedback loop that serves me. I don't overeat. I don't want to overeat because imagine how easy it would be to lose weight if you didn't want to overeat. And everything's set up. If you're overweight and you're overeating, everything's set up in your body and in your mind to overeat, to perpetuate that. So most of us, if we don't overeat, we aren't overweight. Some of us have other issues, but I'm just talking for the majority of people. If we don't overeat, we're not overweight. But not overeating is so hard because your mind and your body are so wired into that feedback loop that's giving you those negative results. The eat, pleasure loop that you love, but that gives you the results that you hate. And once you train your brain, and now that my brain is trained, I can feel those urges and not eat. And it feels like miraculously my desire to overeat has evaporated. It's so liberating to be able to be the weight that I choose, a weight I was in my teens, which is totally bamboozles me and blows my mind. I didn't believe it was possible for me, but it absolutely is. And being healthy and slim as I turn 50 is so delicious. I can't tell you. So the number one thing I've learned this year, and it's something I've struggled with for decades, it feels like forever, is I can stay slim easily with my mind. I don't need anything else. I just need myself. And that is a phenomenal feeling. So let's now move on to number 2. I live alone, which was about loneliness. I live alone. And in a pandemic, I learned a lot about aloneness and about loneliness. And I've seen a lot of people struggling with loneliness in the lockdown if they're living on their own. And I used to have this experience too. I've lived alone for the past 5 years, and I'm not an expert about this, but I do want to tell you about one simple hack that makes being alone feel glorious to me. And I've shared this with a few people, and they said it really worked for them too. So I hope it works for you. I hope it works for you as well. If you live alone and you feel lonely, or even if you live with others and you feel lonely, when you think about people whose company you love, who you just love being around because they make you feel good, think of why you love spending time with the person that you most love spending time with. Sometimes we don't enjoy our own company because we're not making ourselves feel good. All of the mind chatter is terrible. I can't believe you did that again. Or why on earth would you think you would be selected? Or of course you let yourself down again. Or myriad other negative thoughts. Now, if your best friend came over, you'd welcome them excitedly. You'd be pleased to see them. You'd encourage them over any disappointments they'd had. You would laugh at their bad jokes. And you'd enjoy just being in the same room with them, even if you weren't talking to each other. Newsflash. This was a newsflash for me when I first heard it a few years ago. Your best friend is always in the room with you. But are you being a good best friend to you? Are you being supportive and encouraging and friendly and funny? Are you cooking the food you enjoy? Are you doing the movement you enjoy? Are you doing the things you enjoy? Are you even really listening to you and what you want? And when you do this, it feels glorious. The same dinner that previously felt lonely feels beautiful when you acknowledge that you're eating it with one of your favorite people. You can cook something that you love to eat. You can get out your fancy place for your special guests. You can listen to you. You can encourage you. You can love with you. You can just enjoy the company of being with you. And when you treat yourself more consciously like someone you love being with, it will make you enjoy spending time with yourself more. And it makes you a better friend to others, because when you can be more loving and compassionate and fun to yourself, it's so easy to be all of those things for all of the other humans who make mistakes and don't do things the way that you thought they were going to. So that is my number 2. I'd love to know what your thoughts are about that. Is that something you've heard before? Is it something that you've never thought about? I'd love to know your insights on it. So number 2 thing I learned is the delight in the beauty of being your own best friend. When you're your own best friend, it's I wouldn't say it's impossible to be lonely, but loneliness doesn't really come into it because it feels as though you're never alone. Hello there. Did you know we've got a complete library of free videos, blogs, podcasts, free training and guides? And the best thing is it's fully searchable. I know you're going to love it. Check it out at renttorentsuccess.com/blog. Right under the big banner image, there's a search box so that whether you want to know about contracts, whether you want to know about letters or analyzing deals, it's all there for you at the touch of a search box at renttorentsuccess.com/blog. See you there soon. Okay, so the next thing that I learned in 2020 is about mind games. So we've had a lot of stuff going on this year between launching Property Game Changers, completely updating our Rent to Rent Kickstarter program, launching the Rent to Rent Success podcast, writing our Rent to Rent Success book, all the while running our businesses, HMO Heaven and Rent to Rent Success, plus managing refurbishments. Although Nicky will laugh if she's listening to this because I don't have very much to do with managing the refurbishments. But like you, we're busy and it can sometimes feel difficult to keep your mind on track and where it needs to be. There'd be days where I would sit at my computer to write our book and I wouldn't want to do it. I'd get so much resistance. I'd have a strong compulsion to fill the washing machine, make a cup of coffee, urgently wash a spoon, water my plants, stick needles in my eyeballs, do anything else apart from write this book. And it's a fact that for most of us, our minds will try to fuck us up. Sorry, Dad. Whenever you try to do anything scary, because the safe human thing is to hide. And your toddler brain's job is to do 3 things. Number 1, avoid pain. Number 2, seek pleasure. And number 3, do 1 and 2 using as little energy as possible. So I go into more depth about how we sabotage ourselves, as humans, we are designed to sabotage ourselves because we're designed to stay safe. And staying safe means hiding most of the time to most of our toddler brains. So I go into that more in episode 6. So you can check that out at renttorentsuccess.com/6 to hear more about the toddler brain. But one of the most powerful things I've learned in 2020 is how to get your toddler on board. And gosh, it's so simple and so powerful, and I love it so much. When you just know that you'll just feel these urges to do other things, it doesn't mean that something is wrong with you. It means you are a beautiful, imperfect human working exactly as you're designed to. And you can let those urges be there. You can let that discomfort be there, and you can still do the work. It sounds too simple, but it totally works. And there are 2 parts to it. The first one is acknowledging the urge, really that urge to make a cup of tea, that urge to wash that spoon, that urge to get up and do anything apart from do whatever it is that you need to do. It's really fear or another strong emotion that you're resisting, that you don't want to get the result that you say you do want. And you need to calm your toddler. Your inner toddler is inside you saying, don't write a book, don't put it out there, stay inside the cave. It's warm, it's safe inside here. Where you're going is dangerous. We don't want to go to that place. So when you acknowledge that fear or that emotion, whatever the emotion is, it calms your toddler. And if your toddler brain comes up with automatic thoughts like, why would anyone listen to you? What gives you the right to write a book? You can't do this. You can say, I hear you. It's going to be okay. You can be reassuring and you can move on to step 2. And step 2 is choosing a thought which helps you. So you need to have your helpful thought ready in advance and keep replying to your toddler brain and keep working. So here are some ideas of alternative thoughts that are more useful than your auto-suggested toddler thoughts. And that might be, this is for me, this is an example, obviously, from me. This book will help lots of people change their lives, and I'm so excited to write it. So obviously, don't wash the spoon can wait, the coffee can wait. This book will help lots of people change their lives, and I'm so excited to write it. Or another useful thought could be, this is the book that I meant to write. So you've got to choose a thought that works for you, and that, try them on like clothes. So you try on the thoughts and see which thought makes you feel good. And you choose a thought that you can do. I know I can write a chapter of my book today, or I know I can write 500 words today, or I will write 500 words, even if they're rubbish, every day. Whatever you can totally believe and totally stand behind now, it needs to be believable and it needs to make you feel good. And then you use that thought. So when your toddler comes in with the unhelpful, also suggested thoughts, you can just reply with your chosen thoughts. And from that place, you get such different actions. When you feel afraid and it's not acknowledged and you're doing laundry and doing all sorts of other things instead of writing your book, you don't move forward. But when you sit there and acknowledge that you have fears, or you have thoughts that are normal, that are standard human thoughts, but you're just bringing in your better thoughts, you can take action from a place. You can take action from a better place. And so the number 3 thing that I learned in 2020 is I can control how I get things done by consciously choosing my thoughts about them. And again, that really has changed my productivity this year. The amount that we have been able to do this year is beyond anything that I've done before, in terms of, we've written so many words. I mean, it must be around 200,000 words at least, between writing the book, writing the program, and launching the podcast and all of the contents and materials for it, doing the Property Game Changers live series, and lots of other things that I'm not even mentioning. And it's all due to, with this same flawed mind that used to couldn't get anything done, now is consistently taking action just through some of these simple techniques that I'm talking about today. I hope I'm not sounding like a crazy person here, but let me know what you think. So the next thing that has been a personal lesson for me in 2020 is minimalism. I feel so drawn to minimalism and the idea of keeping only the things that you love in your life. Marie Kondo's best-selling book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, first came into my life 5 years ago when I moved from Edinburgh to Bristol and decided to get rid of almost everything. And Marie Kondo's book became hugely popular, and a core principle is only to keep things in your life which spark joy. And I moved to Bristol with things which easily could fit into my Volkswagen Golf. And I was amazed how light I felt. Admittedly, I did move some boxes into Mum's loft, a few boxes, but I haven't seen those things in years and I haven't missed them. So it just goes to show how we don't need most of the things that we choose to keep in our life. And why this came up for me again in 2020 was to do with my home. I need to give you a little bit of context here. So I'm going to wind the clock back to 2016 when I moved to Newport. And when I moved to Newport, my intention was to rent for a while until I found somewhere to buy. Now, I know that some property investors prefer to rent their own home because their own home is a liability, i.e., in the rich dad, poor dad way, it takes money out of their pocket each month. And they want to spend their money on property assets, i.e., property, that puts money into their pocket each month. So they prefer to rent their own home and use the capital that they have to invest in properties that are making them money. But I've been clear from the start that I want to buy my own home for 2 main reasons. One is that property in Newport is affordable. Therefore, for the amount of cash that I'd need to tie up to buy my own property is much smaller than it'd be for investors in central London. So, for example, the average house price in Newport is £190,000 compared with £1.2 million in central London. So in Newport, I can buy an average property with a 10% deposit for £19,000, where in London, I would need to tie up £120,000 as a deposit, which as a property investor, I'd much rather put to work. So that's why I want to buy it, because I live in Newport. And the second thing is I want it my way. I want my home. I want the flooring that I want. I want to drill holes in the walls where I want. I want the painting where I want. And there are more constraints when you're renting. So I feel it's worth more than £20,000 to me to be able to make my own home my own. So fast forward back to 2020. I've been in Newport almost 5 years. I said I want to buy, but yet I'm still renting. I was so comfortable. I had a lovely top floor flat overlooking the River Usk, and I only made half-hearted attempts to look for somewhere to move to. I loved the river views. I loved the light on the river, and I loved my balcony. And I told myself that if I'm buying somewhere, it must be the same as the flat that I have. It must be top floor. It must have river views. It must have 2 bedrooms. It must have 2 bathrooms. So I really limited my options, and I stayed renting. And I'd probably still be renting that same place. But I asked my landlord to redecorate after 4.5 years, because I thought, do you know what? I could do with a refresh here. And in that time, I've never been a day late with my rent. And it's only very few times I've ever contacted the letting agent. But the landlord said no to decoration. And in the moment when I received that email back, I was disappointed. But thank goodness he did say no. Because had he said yeah, I'd be comfortable and I'd be coasting. Possibly I'll be there for another 4 years. But when he said no, it was the push I needed to move out immediately, to find a new home I could make my own. I gave my notice immediately by return of email. And then I pondered what to do, because it was unlikely that I'd be able to find somewhere I wanted to buy and complete on that purchase, in December, within a month. And coincidentally, when I gave notice, we were weeks away from the completion of a refurb of the 4-unit conversion we own. And that's the one, you can listen about that one in episode 50. That's rent2rentsuccess.com/50. You can see the episode there. So it made sense that I move into one of our properties. And that's where the minimalism comes in, because this is a small flat. It's a kitchen lounge, which is, I'm recording from here today. I absolutely love it. The kitchen lounge is 18 square meters. And then it's got a bedroom, separate bedroom, which is 8 square meters. And it's been so fun and so freeing going through all my things and letting go of everything that didn't spark joy, everything I didn't love. It was a glorious feeling. All of my clothes now fit into one single wardrobe, and I love everything in there. I've gotten rid of half a dozen electricity extension cables I was keeping just in case. We keep so much JIC, don't we? By JIC, I mean just in case stuff, JIC. We keep so much just in case, storing things for 2 years until the time we might need it for one use. And I read something somewhere on a minimalist YouTube channel, I think, Matt Devella probably, that we can replace most things that we need, can be bought or borrowed for £20 or within 20 minutes. So we don't need to be a warehouse and stock everything we may need one time in 5 years. We need to have the things that we want to have in our lives on a day-to-day basis, and not all the just in case. So I've moved in now, and on my IGTV, if you're on Instagram, guys, I've put a few videos on there, which is showing what the property is. I've set up a video series on IGTV called Tiny, and it's just the property before the day I moved in with all the boxes. I should do another one now that I've unpacked. Because previously I wasn't good at interiors. I wasn't intentional about buying furniture. And having now worked with interior designer Rohanna Roberts in our business, in our property business, and seeing the magic that Ro has created, I knew I wanted to have her design the interiors for my home. So you can watch there as I intentionally furnish and make this my own. So the number 4 thing that I've learned is less is joy, and the power of minimalism and loving everything in your life. So number 5 is about happiness. This is the big one. I really thought that happiness was things around me, like living on the river. That made me so happy. I thought it was all about the river, like my family, like my business doing well. And 2020 showed me that happiness is in my thoughts. Okay, 2020 and Brooke Castillo showed me that happiness is in my thoughts. And this is liberating because it means I can be happy anywhere, under any circumstances, no matter what anyone else does. I know that this sounds ridiculous. How can it be true? So let me give you a quick example. I moved into a small flat and I chose the thoughts. I embrace minimalism and keeping only the things which spark joy. I'm excited to work with an interior designer and be very intentional about making my new home totally me. I love the beautiful light when I'm working from here. It's got 3 windows and it's just light filled and the light is beautiful. What if I hadn't gone with the thoughts? Conscious thoughts. And what about if I'd gone with the auto-suggested fear-based thoughts that my toddler brain gave me, which were, you won't be happy if your office doesn't look out on the river. You won't be happy in a smaller flat. You won't be happy. So your toddler brain or our toddler brains don't really like change or growth. They just want to avoid pain and seek pleasure. They like to keep things the same. And that's why many of us feel fear when we're trying to change. And if we do want growth and change, then we need to supervise our toddlers by choosing thoughts that help us to grow and change. So this simple skill with the thoughts has been a game changer. It's been a game changer in knowing that I can be happy no matter what happens. And happiness isn't about ease either. It's not about ease and things being easy. It's about the satisfaction of doing hard things. And choosing those thoughts consciously helps us to be able to do those hard things like tough times in business or whatever it may be, and feel good about it, feel good about moving through it, even though the times are tough. So number 5 thing I learned is how to choose happiness. And what I notice as I'm talking to you is that quite a few of those things that I just talked about here were to do with thinking. You know, the weight loss was to do with thinking. The happiness was to do with thinking. The minimalism is to do with thinking. They're all different ways that I've been using my brain this year, which have super, super helped. And I'm just going to see if I can recap. So what we talked about was, I talked about what I learned about fat, or actually what I learned about thinness is to do with your mind. What I learned about loneliness is to do with your mind. What I learned about mind games is to do with your mind. What I learned about minimalism and happiness is all to do with our minds. So I'm just going to run through them. The number 1 thing I learned is I can stay slim easily with my mind. The number 2 thing I learned is the delight in the beauty of being your own best friend. The number 3 thing I learned is how I can control how I get things done by consciously choosing my thoughts about them. And the number 4 thing I learned is that less is joy. And the number 5 thing I learned is I can choose happiness. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I would love to know one thing that you've learned in 2020. Let me know what you think of this episode. And if you like this personal insight, or if you prefer that we stick to property in here. And finally, if one of your goals this year is that you'd like to start your property journey and join us in Rent to Rent Kickstarter and get your year off to a flying start, go over to renttorentsuccess.com/last chance. It's your last chance to join us before the prices go up at midnight on the 21st of January, 2021. Until next week, lovely people, have an amazing rest of the week. And remember, believe bigger, be bolder, and be a game changer. I'll see you soon.
Thank you so much for listening. If you like the links for anything mentioned in today's episode, or if voice is not enough and you want to see us on video too, you can find all the show notes and lots more at renttorentsuccess.com. That's rent number 2, rentsuccess.com. If you've enjoyed today's episode, we'd super appreciate it if you would take a few minutes to review it in your podcast app. Remember, we'll be donating to our B1G1 charities too for each review you give. Until then, believe bigger, be bolder, be a game changer.